Thank you, Hina. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to have you with us on this second edition of the India Climate Summit 2025. And why it is necessary this time, because when we speak of climate change, this is something that has now become a concern as the years go by. And this has been a growing concern when we speak of development, when we speak of the society, when we speak of growing population, and all of those concerns increase overhand as far as when the kind of planet that we are going to leave for our future generations. So leaving a better planet so that there are no complaints, rather something which is sustainable. Mr. Prothi, if you want to begin with you, when we speak of urban centers, because this year itself, ecologically speaking, environmentally speaking, hasn't been off to a great start. We saw wildfires in the US. Currently, there is a heat wave already at 35 degrees being announced there in the UK. We are looking at cloudbursts and floods being reported across the country here back home. The concerns are big and they are serious.
Absolutely. And I think, first of all, it's very hard to follow such a panel, the one before us. I'm an optimist. So I think it's hard to sort of come with a message of doom if you're an optimist. And yes, it has been an incredibly hot year. Last year was the hottest year ever. No denying that. This year is hot. I mean, you step out and this is maybe the wrong clothing to wear in this environment. But at the same time, there's a growing recognition that this is a problem. And why, when I say I'm an optimist, it's because we are still building our cities. We're sitting in a place where the next 20 years, the amount of infrastructure we're going to build is what we built over the last 200 years. To me, that's the opportunity. The fact that we now are more aware is the opportunity. The fact that we need to really start rethinking how we're building things is the opportunity. And I'm not going to pretend it's easy, right? It's not easy at all. But at the same time, we've got experts here who are starting to understand how do you build your road systems in a way where it's not melting in the heat. If you open the newspaper today, if you look at BBC or CNN, and literally I was looking this morning, and in the US they've got a heat dome and they've got melting roads. We've dealt with it much before they have, right? So in a way we are in a place where our understanding of these risks is actually much more advanced to some of the other places. That's the starting point, right? So I represent an organization, it's called the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. It was set up by the Honorable Prime Minister in 2019 as a global institute headquartered in Delhi to not only help India, but to help the world to see how we can actually build infrastructure from a point of view of resilience. Again, that's the opportunity. We can start to do things, and we're doing a number of things where we're trying to understand how do you build infrastructure, or how do you build infrastructure for today, for tomorrow, for day after. We're starting to understand these risks already. So we're not suffering because other places have built their infrastructure and now are struggling. We're still building, right? So to me, I'll just start with a message of optimism that we are doing something, and then come back to the next sets of questions.
But we are overburdened, aren't we, Dr. Prakash? Are we looking at a situation where we are looking at a better future, environmentally speaking, growing population, urban centers? I mean, this is something that we are focusing here. Urban centers that we see with the growing population is adding to that pressure. How do we solve that?
No, absolutely. So if you look at the figures, for example, we are already 35% of India is urbanized. By 2030, around 40% of people will be living in urban areas. By 2050, 50% of our population is going to live in urban areas. Now, I'll put up 3 points, which is actually exposure for people who are living in cities. One is definitely, as the previous panel also came out, is a heat stress, right? What we have seen is that at this moment, the world temperature is about 1.12 degree from the pre-industrial age, but cities actually are warmer to about 2 to 3 degree, depending on where you are. That means a huge heat stroke, which is actually troubling people. That's number one. The second part is also about the cities becoming vulnerable to climate-led event, extreme event. For example, you have cyclones coming, floods happening. As we are speaking now, Gohanzao city is in under flood. Dharmshala is actually going through a huge problem. So cities after cities, we are seeing that. And third, and which is most important part, also is about climate change-led health impact. Look at air pollution, look at water pollution, look at the kind of filth that we have in cities. All that's impacting what we call two parts. One is mobility of the people and mortality of the people. Both of them are important, and we haven't found much answers to this one at this moment. And that's the major problem, because cities are definitely engine of growth. We want more people to come to cities, but we haven't planned for them so that they can live comfortably. Also, the way in which they are not contributing back to the environment, but they are controlling and living in peace with the harmony with the nature. And that's where the problem also lies.
Professor Tripathi, are there any smart answers or solutions to these problems? Yes, we are moving towards a developed country. We are moving towards Viksit Bharat, but there are problems that will add on, and we need to find solutions simultaneously while the growth is happening.
Yeah, I mean, see, it already has been said that cities are already hosting or having about 40% of India's population, and by 2047, it would have probably more than 60 or 70%, reaching to 80 crore people living in the cities. Now, what we are seeing currently that while cities are providing job and they are engine of growth to make India a developed country, unless cities really become developed, they provide clean air, clean water, clean transport, and clean energy to everyone who lives in the city. Or in other words, making cities livable. I don't think that we really can make India a developed or Viksit Bharat by 2047. Now, in order to make it livable city, it is very important that we basically move towards making cities more like a living lab, which has an intelligence layer on that. Right? As of now, what you see, what I mean by a living city and having an intelligence layer on that is that if you look, now cities have 4 or 5 major components. One is of course, urban transport. Now, if you look at all the major cities of the country, we have always a problem of roads getting chock blocked, right? We do not have clean air. We have problem of having clean water taken from tap. And we also have problem of waste in many parts of the Indian cities. Right? Now, let's take one example at a time. Let's take the problem of transport. Now, the real problem is that transport itself is a very complex system. Right? So when we try to bring some, let's say, infrastructure-related decision, we do not have correct idea about what is the travel demand for the people in different part of the city, for different demographies, for different people coming from different socio-economic strata, etc. So if you have clear demand forecasting for the people, that will help you to plan these transport-related infrastructure interventions. Right? When you try to plan, let's say, metros, currently our metros are sub-utilized. If you look at our buses, they are also underutilized, right? So we can have these data-driven, AI-powered systems which can give you very accurate information about where the demand is for travel. Be it metro, be it for buses, then you can run a more optimal system. In fact, you can run a better system than being an optimal system. I gave you an example of transport. Let me also give you an example of water system. Just think about the city of Delhi currently, and we are all knowing that our river Yamuna is facing a tremendous problem. Why that problem is coming? Because everything which is responsible for making Yamuna clean or a dirty river are all working at a suboptimal state. Be it water distribution system, be it sewerage treatment system, or be it waste. All of them are not working at an optimal level. We are discharging actually a lot more wastewater than we should into Yamuna. Now, these problems can definitely be solved. Just imagine that if we know that this particular wastewater treatment plant is discharging more polluted water in Yamuna, and if that information is coming to you, streaming to you live, you can make dynamic adjustment to it. You can bring that WTP to a more optimal level. And that is where we need to work on. I just gave you example of these two, but imagine cities are a system of very complex subsystems, as it was said in the previous panels, that we work in silos. In fact, within silo, I would like to say we work in sub-silos. Data can somewhat really kind of mitigate that problem.
I think I want to ask you another one. If you're using AI and power back programs like the data, how accurate would be that data in solving those problems?
So I can just give you an example, basically drawing from my experience in working in the area of air quality. Just look at the example of city of Delhi, where over last 10 years, there has been lots of effort to clean the air of this city. But still, we haven't been successful despite having added about 40 these what is called continuous air quality monitoring stations. Now imagine Delhi has an area of about 1400 square kilometer. So one station gives you approximately an idea or a single data point of about 40 square kilometer. Imagine in India or city like Delhi, where there are so many diverse activities taking place, one data point in 40 square kilometer, which is 6 kilometer by 6 kilometer, is too little of a data. Now you can make use of multimodal data set, that is the satellite imagery which are currently available at a very low cost. You can also bring other kind of technologies like sensors, etc. And in fact, we have, and others also have done that making use of all these kind of multimodal data set, you can provide information about pollution at about 100 square meter. It doesn't stop there. You could also provide that what are the sources which are making a particular place 100 square meter or even more highly resolved, which are in time and space accurately. So these all information, basically making use of multimodal data, powered by AI, can give you a real ability to take decision and then do cross-sectoral interventions which are missing as of now.
All right. Mr. Prothi, when we speak of urban heat exposure, can you explain to us, because the data suggests nearly 200% is affecting 1.7 billion people since the mid-1980s. How is it going to affect and building environment later as far as the future generations is concerned?
Yeah, so I think, maybe I'll pick up on the data point. We are sitting in Delhi, and when you look at extreme heat, it doesn't affect everybody the same. Right? So I think when we look at these numbers of how many billions of people getting affected, it's also important to understand which part of the city is affected. So to your point on data, South Delhi has got a lot more green environment, and if you put out data sensors, you might realize that South Delhi compared to East Delhi, there may be a gradient difference of 4 or 5 degrees. A middle class or a upper class neighborhood may be cooler than a slum community, right? So what is important in this is, one, to start getting down to the brass tacks of saying who's affected, which area is affected, and which kind of population is affected. Heat has a bigger impact on elderly and children, infants, right? So as a policymaker, what we are trying to do is trying to see how do you unpackage this problem of heat in a city and start to bring a dimension of vulnerability by geography, so location, and by social aspects, by people. So who is more affected, who's more vulnerable, and then how do you craft solutions that are more targeted? Today, if you say everybody in Delhi needs water, that's not true. Most of us may have access to water. We can cool down, we have a shower, we have air conditioning. A lot of people don't. So when we think about the problem of extreme heat in India, in Delhi, in other parts of the country, it's really important to start breaking it down to say it's not universal as a problem, particularly when you talk about heat. Generally it is, but people can cool down, cope with it, others can't. So from a policy point of view, if you start breaking it down, you can be much more efficient with your resources. You don't need policies that are for the entire city. Right? If you say, I need to green certain areas. In the US, they have something called a tree equity mapping exercise. where they look at how green areas across the city intersect with density, socioeconomic conditions, and then identify certain areas maybe need more emphasis than others, right? So as an urban planning expert, I think the idea really is to start understanding these at a much more fine-grained level. Same thing with water flooding, for example. Same thing with water supply systems. It's not universal across a city. Cities are such diverse, complex entities, but the more we can start to understand the nuances, the better becomes our policy efforts to address those issues.
But when you speak of cities, urban centers, aren't those cities as well which were considered once as cities which have cleaner air, cleaner water, or even a better, say, weather in terms of, say, when the mainland is facing over 40 degrees? Even those cities are now getting affected with a heat wave. I mean, we are looking at traffic jams up to the people who are trying to reach to the hill stations during summer vacations. It doesn't give them any respite because of the heat.
Yes. So, again, I'm an optimist, and I'm also somebody who studies history of cities. If you look around the world, we are growing rapidly. If you looked at London, which was growing rapidly, and you start reading their challenges, you'll read something similar. Congestion, air quality problems, water quality problems. London is now, we all go and get an opportunity, you go visit London. But London is not growing, not at the pace we are. So there is a certain acknowledgement that is required that at the pace we are growing, at the scale we are growing, the amount of investments that are going up. I mean, one of the reasons one can drive to Shimla now is because we've got more affluence, right? So, yes, it's a problem. A lot of cities around the world have gone through this same kind of a trajectory, maybe not at the same pace. For me, what one needs to start doing is that, yes, urban development patterns need to be improved. If you look at what the GCF, Global Green Climate Fund, when they fund projects, they don't fund projects that are bad development, they fund projects that have a climate aspect to them. Now, when we're talking about extreme heat and a problem in a city, some of it is coming from just poor development practices. Can we address those? And I think that's where you start getting more targeted with improving housing conditions. That requires attention. Everything is not a climate problem. And I think that's where it becomes important to start segregating what is a climate problem versus what is poor development practices. And I can go on and on, but let me stop on that.
But Dr. Prakash, when we speak, if it is not only a climate problem, now what are we witnessing in these times? We're looking at big cities, metro cities, one time it rains and then we see the consequences. Now, mainly when we speak and blame the administration, because we've seen that's a kind of a vicious circle, they come up with a response saying that the city is only built to a certain level of population that it can take. And right now we are, of course, the largest populated country in the world. It is not built for such kind of population that it can derive.
No, exactly the problem is that one of the basics of the city is planning. But there's no planning in our cities. You just tell me any one city which is totally sanitized, no. Not even one city that we have which is totally sanitized. That means whatever waste is coming out, coming in versus what is going out is zero, right? That is not there. Water, anything, other thing that you can see. So one of the major problem is I would just outline three here. First is about the urban planning concept has not been excised. It is the engineering aspect which is dominating, and that means that the urban planning would actually means that you go with the flow of water, you go with the flow of what we call blue and green infrastructure. That has not happened. That's number one. The second thing which has also not happened is about the infrastructure and the futuristic perspective, and that's again related to urban planning, is that we are not building cities for our future. We are just coping with whatever is coming everyday basis, right? And that coping mechanism itself is dwindling because we are not able to cope with the rising changes in the population and the influx of people who are coming. The third and most important part is also about climate resilient infrastructure. As we are seeing that the cities are more exposed to vulnerability, more exposed to extreme climate event, we not only have to build the cities but also build with climate resilient infrastructure in mind. That means it will cost you 4 times or 3 times more the money that you have spent before. And that is where no one is talking about. And that's where the cities of the future that we have to build about.
Are you agreeing or not agree?
Totally disagree.
totally
I am dealing with this issue on a daily basis. The organization I lead is called the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. Resilient infrastructure is not more expensive by 2 to 3%. Resilience may be marginally more costly. At the same time, one is finding out that if you invest in improvements, let's say you're driving to Shimla, we're doing a study in Himachal right now. You're driving to Shimla and your road is getting impacted by landslides. If you make an improvement to your landslide protection and that road functions, you've already recovered your cost 3 times. So the World Bank has come out with a study.
To tackle it,
No,
not to
that's what
avoid
I'm
it.
saying. These are very theoretical understanding. What you see on ground, where is, I'm just asking very simple. Give me one city which is totally climate resilient, totally zero waste, not even one city. So where are we talking about, right? I mean, all this planning process is already on paper. I don't see anything which is happening on ground. And I am working with people on ground and I don't see much changes happening, unfortunately. Definitely, I'm also pessimistic, optimistic like you, but not looking at the situation
But a
that I
realist.
see. Very, very sad situation.
Right. But Professor Tripathi, what's your take on that?
Well, I think that infrastructure, if they don't communicate with each other, I mean, then possibly we will not be able to respond to the emerging situation. I just gave some examples here. I think what is happening that we are having a lot of infrastructure-related interventions, but they are not based on evidences. They are not based on data. I just gave you an example that, in fact, I wanted to complete that there is a lot of interconnectedness here, that if you do not provide the clean mobility, it actually becomes a climate costly affair, right? That more people bring that private vehicle on the road, and it actually adds more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere and more pollution. I give you another example, that when you don't get or give people water directly from tap, then most of the people who can afford it like to have water purification system in their house. We all know that it adds further burden to the wastage of water, as well as, of course, it also doesn't run without electricity or power. So basically, I would again say that if we are able to run the system and subsystems with more data and in a better way, that where there is some intelligence there by AI, I think we can have better coordinated overall system, and that is what is required in cities. That we have here a very kind of a classic example of a very complex system of systems, and if they continue to run in silos, I don't think that we can ever be able to overcome this problem. Bringing to the issue of climate resilience, again, I believe that, I mean, in earlier panel, IMD DG spoke about that they are trying to give a lot of forecasted, climate and weather parameters, but I still believe there is a lot of scope to provide these data set with a better resolution and with better accuracy. What I mean by that, what you need to give, as one of our panelists pointed out, that people should actually know, because we know there is so much of variability in the city, that heat island could be 7-8 degrees warmer. Now, if you add it on the top of maximum temperature during summertime, 44, 45 plus 7 degrees, it makes 51. So sensible heat or heat stress can go to 55 or 60 degrees. We must understand that. So these kind of predictions can be given to people in 2 or 3 days in advance. I think we can bring a lot of more resilience among people. People will start trusting these kind of predicted variable, and that can come on their app, and then they can see. I mean, I know that in US and in Europe 40 years back, they were not actually relying a lot on the weather forecast. Now, everyone actually takes an umbrella or goes without umbrella when they come out of the house, right? This is what kind of confidence we have to bring in people in our weather forecasting system.
Well, it's supposed to rain today according to the forecast, but currently it feels like over 44 degrees that we are speaking, but the humidity levels is so high. But Dr. Prakash, last word, if you want to say a comment or any certain optimism that you see, because we are seeing weather change, climate change dramatically happening. So I will not ask you about next 50 years, but possibly in the next 10 years.
I would say that we have to protect our green and blue infrastructure. What we are doing is contrary, but there are some positive examples also. For example, Telangana has come out with this Harita Haram program, which has actually increased 7% of green cover in the entire state. So it is possible, and it's possible today. Protecting the blue infrastructure, all the lakes, ponds, and the river bodies that we have to protect them. And most of the time it is actually happening otherwise, but we must rise above the political process and protect those bodies. Otherwise, it's going to be a difficult thing. Last point is, I think urban planning has to go with the environment planning. The flow of the water in the city, the way in which city has come about, that has to be protected. And that's the core of the city. That is what I would suggest.
Amit, last comment?
I think I have faith in our youth and data. I think we are really at a cusp of how much we can do with data and AI. We couldn't imagine using geospatial data to understand problems at such a fine-grained level, and today we can. And the awareness that's growing in the next generation, I joke because I've got gray hair, is that my generation created the problem, but the next generation is asking a lot more questions, and I have a lot of faith in what they'll bring. So I'll stop.
Well, is AI the future? That also remains a question as far as how accurate it would be, especially when it comes to forecasting such kind of levels of climate change that is now being witnessed. Are we leaving behind a better future for our next generation, a better planet for them? Well, that remains to be seen. Urban centers that have been growing, but so is climate change. Thank you very much, gentlemen. It's been an honor to have you with us here on the ICS 2025. Thank you.
Thank you, Amita, and thank you very much, gentlemen, for that comprehensive discussion on urban climate resilience. I'd like to request Amita now to present the panelists with a token of our appreciation. A big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.